Welcome back to another explainer. Look, today we're going to fundamentally reframe how we think about one of the most famous and, let's be honest, arguably most misunderstood subjects in biology. When you hear the word fat, your mind probably jumps straight to dietary villains, right? Calories, grease, the stuff we're supposed to avoid. But today we're zooming in on the massive, fascinating, and incredibly specialized family of molecules known as lipids. Far from being just the bad guys, lipids are basically the unsung heroes of biology. They are literally keeping every single cell in your body intact, communicating, and, well, alive. Let's get into it.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for the explainer. First up, we'll meet the lipid family. Second, simple lipids, fats and waxes. Third, compound lipids, membrane builders. Fourth, derived lipids, steroids and messengers. And finally, we'll wrap up with their essential functions.
Section 1. Meet the lipid family. Beyond just fat.
To truly grasp this wildly diverse group of molecules, let's strip away the complex biology for a second and just look at the bare chemical foundation. At their core, lipids are compounds made up mostly of carbon and hydrogen, with just a tiny bit of oxygen thrown in. But you know what really defines a lipid? It's how it behaves. Unlike carbs or proteins, lipids are uniquely not polymers. They aren't just built from long, repetitive chains of the exact same building blocks. And the absolute defining trait? They are completely water-insoluble. They absolutely refuse to mix with water. Literally, oil and water. If you actually want to dissolve a lipid, you have to use an organic solvent. Think ether, benzene, or acetone.
So what's actually under the hood here? Well, the base components are simple fatty acids, glycerol, or if you're feeling fancy, trihydroxypropane, or a combination of both. Now, a standard fatty acid is essentially this unbranched carbon chain with a carboxyl group attached right at the end, and they vary a lot in length. For instance, palmitic acid, that's got 16 carbon atoms. Arachidonic acid, that one packs 20. But here's the absolute coolest part. Fatty acids have this intense dual personality. The terminal carboxyl group at one end is polar, meaning it absolutely loves water, but that long hydrocarbon tail attached to it, totally nonpolar and completely insoluble. And as that tail gets longer, the whole molecule becomes less and less water-soluble. It's like one end is desperately reaching for water while the other end is completely rejecting it.
Moving right along to Section 2, simple lipids, fats and waxes, the heavy lifters. Now that we've got the basic building blocks down, let's look at the heavy lifters. When we talk about everyday fats, we almost always split them into saturated and unsaturated. But what does that actually mean on a chemical level? Well, a saturated fatty acid, like palmitic or stearic acid, has 0 double bonds in its carbon chain. It's just a straight, rigid structure. Because of that rigidity, it has a high melting point, which is exactly why things like butter and ghee are solid sitting on your kitchen counter. On the flip side, if you introduce just one single double bond, or maybe a few, into that chain, like an oleic acid, you get an unsaturated fat. That tiny structural kink drops the melting point drastically, giving you liquids at room temp, like your standard sunflower oil. It is crazy how literally one chemical double bond is the entire difference between a solid stick of butter and a bottle of oil. Now, when you combine these fatty acids with glycerol, you get what we call neutral or true fats, officially known as glycerides. Think of glycerol as kind of like a chemical docking station. It can grab onto 1, 2, or even 3 long fatty acid chains, creating mono, di, or triglycerides. And when a glycerol docks with 3 identical fatty acids, that's when you get a pure fat, like tripalmitin or tristerion.
Okay, but here's a question for you. We know what happens when fatty acids bind with glycerol, right? You get everyday fats. But what happens to a simple lipid when you totally swap out that glycerol for an alcohol with a high molecular weight? You get waxes. That's right, waxes are just simple lipids that traded their glycerol for high molecular weight alcohols. This creates these incredibly protective, totally insoluble coatings. And you see them everywhere in the real world. Worker bees actually secrete bee wax chemically, that's hexacosyl palmitids, right out of their abdominal glands to construct their honeycombs.
Then you've got lanolin. That's a waterproof wool fat made of fatty acids and cholesterol that keeps animal fur safe from the rain and cold. Even bacteria use this trick. The bacteria that cause tuberculosis and leprosy produce something called wax D, which acts as this crazy waxy armor that makes them so highly pathogenic. And of course, closer to home, cerumen. That's just the protective earwax produced by the glands in our very own ears. Same exact lipid family, completely wildly different biological applications.
All right, Section 3, compound lipids, membrane builders, the architects.
So, waxes are fantastic for protection, but organisms need way more complex structures to actually function. Enter compound lipids. These are esters of fatty acids with alcohol, just like we've been talking about, but they've got extra, highly specialized add-ons. It's basically modular biology. Plugging a new element to a lipid completely changes its job. If you plug in a phosphate and choline, boom, you get phospholipids like lecithin, which are the main builders of our cellular biomembranes. Swap that for a sugar, like galactose, and you get glycolipids. Those build the myelin sheath around our nerves and the outer membranes of plant chloroplasts. Add proteins, you get lipoproteins, another massive player in cell membranes. Add pigments, now you've got chromolipids, which give us compounds like carotenoids and vitamin A.
And honestly, some of these compound lipids are insanely specialized, especially when we're talking about the nervous system. Cerebrosides, for example, have a sugar unit in their neutral polar head, and they are absolute must-haves for brain cell membranes. Gangliosides are even more complex. You find these in our brain's gray matter, handling iron transport. And get this, they actually form the very receptors that viral particles and toxins, like cholera, latch onto. Then there are the sphingomyelins. These guys completely break the rules. They don't contain glycerol at all. Instead, they use this complex amino alcohol called sphingosine. And without sphingomyelins, the medullary sheaths that protect our nerve fibers, they just couldn't exist.
Moving into Section 4, derived lipids, steroids and messengers, the communicators.
Now, so far, literally every single lipid we've covered has relied on fatty acids. But what happens when a lipid doesn't contain any fatty acids at all? I mean, how can it even be in the lipid family tree? The answer? Steroids. Steroids are derived lipids. They completely lack fatty acids, but they still have fat-like properties and solubility, so they're in the club. Structurally, they are a totally different beast, built from a base of 4 fused carbon rings. Now, what's really fascinating here is the absolute most infamous steroid of them all, cholesterol. Diet culture has completely demonized cholesterol for decades, but it's actually synthesized right in our liver and is the most abundant steroid in animal tissue. Far from just being some dietary hazard you need to avoid, cholesterol is an absolutely critical, vital component of our cellular plasma membranes. Without it, our cells would literally fall apart.
But derived lipids aren't just structural. They're also powerful chemical messengers, prostaglandins, which actually come from that 20-carbon arachidonic acid we mentioned way back at the start, function as hormone-like messengers passing crucial signals between your cells. And these derived lipids even have massive modern medical applications. Take diosgenin, for example. It's a derived lipid produced naturally by the yam plant, and it's actually a key component utilized in the creation of anti-fertility pills. Seriously, it's wild to think a simple yam holds that kind of targeted chemical power.
Finally, Section 5, essential functions, why we need them.
Let's pull all this complex biochemistry together and talk about exactly why we'd be dead without this diverse family of molecules. Remember earlier when we called simple lipids the heavy lifters? Well, here's the data point to prove it. 9.0. Neutral fats, or triglycerides, are our body's ultimate, highly concentrated fuel reserves. The physiological fuel value of just 1 single gram of triglycerides is a massive 9.0 kilocalories. That is exactly why our liver, our skin, and practically every animal on the globe relies on storing triglycerides as their primary, go-to energy bank.
But hey, energy storage is just the beginning. Lipids are out there performing biological heroics every single second. They provide homeothermy, meaning they insulate and maintain our internal body temperature. That thick layer of blubber, it's literally the only thing keeping whales, seals, and polar bears alive in freezing ocean waters. Lipids also act as built-in shock-absorbing cushions, physically protecting your most delicate organs like your kidneys and your eyeballs from impact. Plus, without lipids, your body couldn't even absorb essential fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. And out in the wild, waxy lipids form water-resistant layers on birds and insects, and they stop vital plants from drying out and losing all their water to transpiration.
So the big takeaway here is that lipids aren't just some abstract internal biological phenomenon. Human civilization literally relies on them to run our daily lives. We use lipid waxes to manufacture wax paper to keep our food fresh. We harvest lanolin fat to create soothing medical ointments and cosmetic creams. We've even relied on spermaceti oil as a vital mechanical lubricant for super delicate instruments. And back inside our bodies, that supposedly evil cholesterol, it's the required precursor to create bile salts for digestion, not to mention our steroid hormones. In fact, without cholesterol and a closely related lipid called ergosterol, our bodies wouldn't even be able to synthesize vitamin D from the sun.
Which brings us to our final thought. We kicked off this explainer by challenging the common, everyday perception of fat. We've traced the family tree all the way from simple, water-hating carbon chains to the highly complex sphingomyelins protecting our brain cells, right up to the steroids keeping our membranes intact. Given their absolutely critical roles as structural architects, complex chemical messengers, and vital protectors in every single cell, nerve, and organ, are lipids actually the most misunderstood heroes of biology? I really hope this deep dive has helped you see the elegant, mind-blowing complexity of the molecules that are quietly keeping us alive. Keep questioning the basics, guys, and we'll see you in the next explainer.